Planting tomato seeds. That's what's on tap today here at Gardening Gal. And I'm going to be planting two different varieties of tomatoes that I'm going to grow indoor. These are miniature tomatoes, so they only grow maybe a foot maximum. So I can grow them over the winter inside and have some fresh tomatoes. But what I'm doing is growing it in a few different ways. I'm growing it in kind of a conventional way, a moderately conventional way, and a definitely unconventional way. So let's go ahead and see what they do, and then let's keep track of them over this winter, and let's see, do any of these ways outweigh the other? Let's get started. So let's kind of go over what I plan to do when planting these tomato seeds. I have probably some peat pots. I bought these a couple years ago, and although I don't particularly like using them, I have them, so I may as well, and it's good for this experiment. Then I have your typical little 3-ounce cup, and then I have this bio sponge. I use the Park Whopper Biodome, and it uses these sponges. And right now I'm kind of rehydrating this one because it's been stored for about a year or so, so it's gotten dried out. But it's absorbing its water. So while this is going on and absorbing the water, and by the way, this is what it looks like, totally dry, and it's getting larger, expands as it gets water. While I'm waiting for these to go ahead and soak up, we'll go ahead and get started with the other two methods. First thing I do with the ones that I'm just going to grow in these little cups is get some slashes in the bottom so that water can drain out. So I'm just using a little utility knife and putting in little holes in the bottom. We start by having some seed starting mix. Now this is actually kind of a combination of several seed starting mixes all mixed together, only because I haven't found one that I like straight out of the bag. But what you need for a good seed starting mix is it has to have some aeration. So in other words, although I don't really want a stick in there, and that's why I haven't found a perfect one, because every seed starting mix I've ever looked at has had little chips and sticks and whatever in it. But what you want is something that's pretty fine grained. It has to have some drainage. That's what you see with the little white pieces of perlite. And although I guess the sticks would make for some drainage, they're not my favorite thing to have in there. Especially you don't want to have any sticks on top of your seeds. Now if you have something that's a big clump, usually if you can just break it up, that's fine. But right now this is dry, and I really don't want to put it into my cups dry, so I've got to start hydrating it. And to do that, I've just got some water that I'm just going to pour into it just to moisten it. And I'm going to let this sit for a minute to moisten, and then we'll go on to the next step. One of the reasons that I'm hydrating this mix ahead of time instead of just putting it in dry is because this stuff is often notoriously hard to moisten. So if you pre-moisten it and it's just damp, it's not wet or soupy or anything like that, that makes it so much easier when you're actually in the final steps and have to give it its final watering. So pre-moisten your soil mix, whatever it is you choose to use, but just make sure that it's not soupy. It needs to be, it feels moist, but when you put your hands on it and squeeze it, you really don't want to have any water come out of it. So now that we got that, let me brush off my hands real quick, and we will go to first our little cups here. So what I am doing, and actually I'm not going to do it in this because it makes much more sense to do it in here, where if the soil falls out, it falls out into the container with the rest of the soil. Yes. So I'm putting it in. Now, you notice that with the back of my spoon, I'm just very slightly compressing it, and I mean very slightly. This is just to get out any big air pockets. Now your plants are going to need some air. I mean, the seeds need some air in order to germinate. So they don't want to be smothered, but also you don't want to have any large air pockets that the plant's going to get stuck in which case it's also going to fail to grow because it's not in contact with the soil. So as you can see, I have, they're not quite up to the top. So I'm going to do this also to my 2 cups that I'm just growing straight like this with soil in it. For the cups that I have this little bio sponge in, I have the sponge in, it's been rehydrated, and I'm putting the soil around it. There is kind of a method to my madness that I discovered last year when I was trying this out. So I'm just making sure that I don't hit the camera too much and that I've got enough soil around it. So in other words, I don't want the bio sponge to be floating around in the cup. And by the way, I do have holes on the bottom of these cups as well. Now you notice that it's much higher than these guys, and that's mainly because of the sponge, but otherwise they're planted somewhat similarly. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is create some labels, because I have 2 different kinds of tomatoes I'm growing, the Micro Tom and the Orange Hat, and I'm going to have them one of each kind. So I'm going to grow one Orange Hat in 3 different ones and the Micro Tom in 3 different ones, and we'll see how well they perform. So what I have here are the back row are the Micro Toms, and I've already planted them. Now I haven't planted these guys yet, but one thing I wanted to note is that before I planted the seeds, I put the labels in, and there's a reason for this. When you put a label in, it will disturb the soil. So I like to put my labels in ahead of time, and that way I'm sure that I am not accidentally, when I put the label in, pushing a seed way, way, way down. All right, so I've got that. So let's talk about how we plant these, which is really going to be the same way. This is the only one that's going to be different. Okay, so I have some seeds in my hand, and what I'm doing is I'm just taking a little poking tool. You can take like a pencil or something like that. And I'm just making a couple little divots in the soil, and I will put a seed in each divot. 2. Then just press down lightly, and then I will go ahead and take a little bit of extra soil and just sprinkle it over. And then I will press that down, and I'm pressing it down very lightly, so I'm not compacting it. Because if there's one thing that seeds don't like, it's to be compacted, because no oxygen that way. So this cup I'm doing about the same. So now here's the one that has the bio sponge in it. To do this, I am really kind of just scraping a little spot off on each side. And that's where I'm going to be doing my planting. And I see I have this log here. I'm going to toss that. But the sponge is right beneath it, so I can't really dig into it, except for I can press down slightly with this. And for this you really do need something like a chopstick, or as in what this is it's just an orange wood stick that you use for nail polish stuff. So let me get out a couple of seeds and show you how I planted this one. And putting the seeds, and they're almost surface sowed, not quite. I'm pressing them down lightly, and then I will go ahead and get some extra soil and put it on there. If I see any clumps, I'll put that back in the soil container, because at this point I just want things that are light, so to speak, against it. All right, so I've got everything all set up. So what I'm going to do now is I've got like a little mister bottle, and I'm just going to mist the top of each container. Now remember, the soil is already damp, so this is just giving a little bit of extra water to maybe settle the new soil that I put on top, just to make sure that it's in good contact with the seeds. While I'm waiting for this to go ahead and soak in, one thing I forgot to mention about the labels. I have always used like Sharpies or whatever to label my plants, and sometimes they work great, sometimes they fail miserably. And like this past year, I had all the labels on all my peppers just wear off, and I had no idea what I was eating towards the end of the season, with a very few exceptions. So I got the idea of using acrylic paint pens, you know, like you use for rock painting. Now this one is a more expensive version, the Posca, and I have this around because I do all kinds of crafting. But look for some inexpensive paint pens with an extra fine tip. And I've been trialing some this winter because I planted a fall garden, and I used the acrylic paint pens on it, and I can read those labels really easily. And the ones that I didn't go ahead and do like I just did the Sharpie, they've already worn off. So paint pens, acrylic paint pens. I figured that if you're rock painting and you're leaving the rocks out in the elements, hey, that should work fine for labels. Okay, here they are. I've got them on a heating pad. You'll notice that I have a light up here. It's not because that they need light, because tomato seeds don't need light to germinate. I just needed enough light to film. So these I expect to be sprouting, within a week. Usually if I have them on a heating mat, they will sprout within 3 to 4 days. But we'll come back next weekend and we will see what these look like. Have they sprouted? Have any sprouted? If they have any done better so far than the others? Peat pot or sphagnum moss, well, peat pot I guess you want to call it. Just plain old regular cup, and then the little cup that has the biosponge in it. And you did notice that I do have a clear cover on top, and that's just to kind of keep in the moisture. There are vent holes on top. If I wanted to close the vent holes, I could put something on top of it, I guess, or put some plastic on top. But for right now, I'm going to leave the vent holes open just to wait until I see this heat mat heated up some. Anyway, this is it for today's video. Thanks for watching. If you've watched this long, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you again soon. This is Gail, Gardening Gal, saying have a great day gardening. Bye.